1A. Okay, we are live. Hey, you guys. So this is episode 3 of Sagas and Sass. This is going to be a special surprise episode. Arguably, this should have been our first episode, but I was honestly saving what makes a saga for sort of like an off week, or really I was thinking between like the first series that we went through and the second, or maybe if we if the stupid Netflix show doesn't come out for Grishaverse, we'd kind of throw it in there as a fun, addition. But instead, because of things that are happening in the United States right now, some of us are kind of not in the mood or a little behind. So we are going to do the What Makes a Saga episode now, which isn't a bad time. We just finished our first book, so it's not like we're doing it in the middle of one of the books we're reading. I guess that's a plus. And I was also able to gather up some special guests. So again, I am Tara. You can find me across the web at A Geek Saga. I am a webcaster, podcaster, public speaker, and founder and organizer of Ice and Fire Con, which is the first ever Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire convention in the US. And I'm sure we will talk about ASWAF at some point, because that is definitely a saga of sorts. But okay, we'll start. We'll go I'm backwards here. We'll go with you next, Thomas.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi.
I don't know how you like being referred to on like podcasts.
Yeah, no, it's a tricky thing. I'm a man that goes by many names. Thomas, Tommy, are what you would probably call me in everyday life. If you are a listener to the New Dad podcast, you know me as Uncle Tickles. I am a host of a podcast. I was, up until very recently, a senior financial analyst for a very large, maybe the leader in trade shows and conventions. COVID kind of put that to an end, and I am a full-time stay-at-home dad now to 2 beautiful boys, and that pretty much sums me up in a nutshell.
All right, Jonathan, I believe you're next.
I'm Jonathan Egan, and I'm just a longtime genre fan who's trying to catch up on his reading, since I watch way too much TV and at the moment play a lot too much golf.
I think Nick would be next.
Sure, I'll go next. Nick at Nick Popio, most places. Geek. I like to dress well, as you can see, and public speaker, marketing professional, all those fun things. I've already done this a few times, so hopefully you're tuning in for the 3rd time.
Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. Yeah, hopefully we've got some people who will be watching this, for the 3rd-ish time, whatever. God, it's the 3rd time already. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Shelby, you are last but not least.
Hi, I'm Shelby. I'm small. I'm a longtime attendee of Ice. Well, not long time, just a couple of years attendee of Ice and Fire Con. I am the brand new U.S. history professor at Columbia College here in Vienna, and I focus most of my studying and fun studying time to mythology, theology, and ancient cultures. I do way too much costuming for it to be healthy on my wallet, but shit happens. I also am a longtime D&D fan and overall annoyance, but I'm here, so hopefully I don't miss you all too much.
Nah, you're good. All right. So yes, this is a unprecedented time in these uncertain and unprecedented times. Things have to change last minute, but like I said, this is a discussion I was hoping to have at some point eventually, so why not tonight in the middle of the United States' own saga?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, which is something we might, talk a little bit about, depending on how much alcohol I have, which at this point is probably going to be a bunch. So now that we've gone through our introductions, obviously, I think that the modern, idea of what makes a saga is very different from what what the original. I mean, not think it definitely is very different from what the original, explanation of a saga was, which was basically just any story that was that featured like a heroic journey, essentially, usually like spanning over generations, often of the same like family, village, whatever. So they often were, or originally it was one story though, like one. So like, one book would be a saga. It was a very long book, or spoken word story or whatever, but it was its own contained thing, not necessarily, a trilogy or longer. So, and it has Nordic roots, Germanic as well. But I mean, I think like for me, the Nordic side of things has always kind of been the more, I don't know. Like, I've always seen it as more of a Nordic thing, but I'm also super Swedish. So despite the fact that it was originally supposed to be like one contained tale, nowadays, it doesn't refer to like a number of books or whatever. Nowadays, it just refers to a non-realistic epic work of fiction. Like it's often these days, it's almost always a series that people refer to as sagas. You rarely see a single book and say that is a saga. And this is just kind of what we've been trained to like believe or whatever at this point. But I mean, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like, do you think that modern stories can be sagas without being a series?
Well, the answer is maybe, but I want to go back to why you say it has to be non-realistic. Because I
did not say it has to be. That's just the general, like, generally nowadays, that's what is assumed to be like fantasy and sci-fi, really. And usually fantasy more than sci-fi.
Because I go back to when I was in high school, college, and reading James Clavell and Noble House and Gaijin and Shogun. And that was clearly a saga. And that was historical fiction, but it was definitely not science fiction or fantasy. So I think it could be any genre. I don't think you have to limit it to science fiction and fantasy. But
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of the idea that we've been led to believe or whatever.
So as far as sagas go, from what I found, depending on the culture, you're right, Nordic was very much a sit down and listen to this long tale in one session and learn to tell the tale with your next of kin. But as the oral traditions of different cultures kind of took that and ran with it in their own ways, places like the Celtic Isles and Rome and places like Japan, the idea of a saga wasn't just a one-sitting thing. It was a continuous tale that you told in one session, you told one part, and then another person would add on to that. And it was a continuing story that would advance piece by piece by piece and eventually all get smashed into one. I think the most semi-modern that would be considered realistic fantasy would be the Sherlock Holmes series. It was semi-realistic, but it was a continuation of a single man's story and journey through his life, his family's life, that was added onto piece by piece, even by others, not the author. So sagas in semi-modern history have definitely developed into our modern idea of, this is a long-term series. Well, is it the story of one person, or is it a multiple person story, multiple plot line, multiple persons' lives involved instead of the story of one person? If that makes sense. I
like the idea too of it not being married to something that's unrealistic, and I kind of I guess gravitate towards the Nordic definition, which is just the long story, because I think that's a broader definition. It gives us a little bit more material to work with. I know in the document I listed some sagas that are some of my favorites. And, one that I had included on there was The Old Man and the Sea, which is a Hemingway story. It's a short story, but I don't think, and kind of going to Jonathan's point, super realistic, right? There were definitely these villages in Cuba where people were fishing, and people were fishing into their old age. And the battle between this man and the fish, and he's an uncommon hero, I guess you would say. So I like the idea that it can just be a long story. It doesn't have to be something that's built upon through generations. But it's funny, Shelby, as you were talking about Sherlock Holmes, it reminded me of another modern potential saga, and one of my dad's favorite authors, Tom Clancy, who writes about a lot of the same character going through these realistic, very highly dramatic, scenarios on a political stage, and it's just kind of a similar thing where you're following this character through these different adventures. And I'm sure if we kind of put our collective minds, there's probably a lot of other modern examples that we could think of.
Absolutely. And Tara brought up a very good point of the hero journey being a pivotal point of most both ancient, fantastic, realistic. Any saga really follows a hero's arc journey, a literary hero's arc journey, where you have the buildup of someone who is not a hero into how they became a hero, trials and tribulations along the way, eventually a fall, and then the possibility of a climactic rise back to power or a full moralistic fall. So applying that to our sagas that we know, it helps us narrow the field of, is this truly a heroic saga, or is this an epic of tragedy, or is this classified more as an epic versus more of a saga?
After you started to go into some Joseph Campbell territory there.
I mean, I guess could all epics be considered sagas and vice versa? I would say not necessarily all, but I mean, the idea of it being epic is definitely a descriptor of of sagas. So
I would say every saga is an epic, but not every epic is a saga, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Because an epic is a tale of great proportions that spans time and tells a story that everyone wants to be a part of and make their own versions of and learns from many moralistic lessons. Whereas the saga, typically, again, like you said, the hero's journey is down and then back up. An epic can have any number of endings depending on the moralistic story you want to tell. Like we have the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest saga and epic story in history itself, where we have a king coming from nothing and rising against so many pitfalls and trials and pivotal things that we are still discovering chapters, and then eventually coming to be known, dying very peacefully, semi-peacefully, not so peacefully, depending on where you find the final story. And as we find these different endings to the story, depending on the culture where you found them, the epic's ending has changed based on that moralistic. Whereas those who see it as a saga of Gilgamesh instead of the Epic of Gilgamesh always have him rising to that high point at the end. So I guess I just went completely on a tangent, and I'm sorry.
No, not really. I mean, I asked, is every epic a saga and vice versa? And I said I didn't, probably not. But yeah, I think you're right that every saga is an epic, but not every epic is a saga. Yeah. I think that's probably a good way to put it. And I guess and again, what we consider a saga nowadays. I mean, I guess this is something that I used to make jokes about, because the first modern series that I really heard the word saga attached to was Twilight. And I've already expressed my Twilight hate on previous episodes of this webcast. Because it fits some of the points, I guess, of being a saga, but as a whole, no thanks. So, but because that was the first modern series that I heard that term attached to, and I'm sure it might have been attached to other things before that. I mean, I guess Star Wars was a saga, but that's movies. So I was thinking book series at this point. But obviously Star Wars was a saga. But because that was the first book series I I heard that word attached to, I really have like gone out of my way to be like, no. What actually is, what book series actually are sagas and not just like teenage angst filled, like middle-aged wife and mother's fantasy of weird sparkling vampires. I don't know. I'm sorry. I wish I could be a nicer person about Twilight. I just can't.
No, that's fine. Honestly, I don't want to be that person and make you hate me because I don't like Twilight either. But it does suit the definition of a saga. It sucks, but it does because it's Bella's unfortunate rise to something, fall because of her own idiocy and bullshit, and then rise up to, I am now an almighty pinnacle vampire that no vampires can touch. And it's like,
does she ever fall though? Because like,
I mean, she
in
tries to
my
kill herself repeatedly.
yeah, that's just bad writing.
Bad
It's
writing,
just-
bad saga, but still a saga.
Does quality play a factor in whether something is a saga?
I think when suicide is used as a plot device, it can be.
Ugh. Yeah.
You know, she was never gonna kill herself, like, and that's problematic in and of itself. Like, so I have, you know, I mean, and Nick, being a mental health advocate yourself, like that is very problematic. Like,
Oh,
like, let's ignore all the other issues with Twilight, like, and focus on the fact that like she's constantly like threatening to do it like glorifies it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like in a way that I just can't.
Well, I think that's a little bit of the problem with a term that can be used so broadly, right? Is that it's going to cast a pretty big umbrella that a lot of stuff's going to fit underneath, and a lot of that stuff isn't going to be great. You know, Twilight being perhaps a great example. I think there's another example, you know, and you were talking at the top of the show about some real world sagas, and you know, you were using the example of the election, but I think, you know, reality TV is another example of you know, real world sagas that kind of show just how addicted we are to this, because you know, we're watching these characters, you know, over the course of seasons after season after season rise and fall, and it's manufactured saga, right? But still, it's an interesting, if you want to talk about really poor sagas right out there, reality TV has to be at the top of the list, maybe above Twilight, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying
Yeah.
Big Brother is not up to your standards of a good saga?
Well, I'm not saying all reality TV shows are below Twilight. I'm just saying that you know, there's probably a big host of them that do. You know, I love Below Deck. I love some Vanderpump Rules. Some of those are probably a little ranked highly, more higher above Twilight for me. But yeah, I mean, I think you have some really good examples of something that could be considered a saga that's trash, but still fits that definition, right?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point you bring up with reality TV being a very good pinnacle point of what is a good saga versus what is a bad saga. There are shows like what's going on right now, The Good Doctor, based on K-drama of the same show, is the saga of this autistic doctor who wants to rise into his field and be known. That's a great saga on reality TV right now. And then you have trash TV like Jersey Shore, where it's like there is no journey here, kind of, little bit, mostly just wannabe Italians throwing their shirts off. Okay.
Absolutely. Just to give a little shine to another reality, I don't know if you call it reality TV or a docuseries, but Love on the Spectrum. I consider that a saga. One of the best things I've watched in 2020. Highly recommend it for anyone that's looking for something to watch. And, you know, and it is, you're following these individuals through their saga of trying to find love, you know, with the challenge of being autistic. It's fantastic.
I've never heard of that. What
It's on Netflix. It's amazing. It's amazing. I've watched it like 3 times already, and anytime I'm feeling down, I need to pick me up. I mean, it's just some of the most genuine, kind-hearted, beautiful souls you'll ever see. So, I mean, for sure, check it out if you haven't.
Could definitely use that right about now.
Yes.
Yeah,
Everyone,
yeah.
go watch Love on the Spectrum right now.
That's a
Michael,
good
Michael will
suggestion.
become everyone's fan favorite. I could watch Michael all day. Please.
Are you saying this makes you happier than watching Gilmore Girls?
That's so funny you say that because my wife is actually watching Gilmore Girls right now. She's binging it all. So
Has she seen it before?
She watched like the last 2 or 3 seasons and wasn't like really into it. So she went back and she's been watching. So I'm really more invested in Gilmore Girls than I would like to admit at this point.
Oh my gosh! Just you wait.
Oh.
Just you wait.
I have so many hot takes on this that I won't really monopolize the show for that. But yeah.
No, yeah, actually, I could do an entire episode on Gilmore Girls alone because it actually is we actually talked at some point before. Jonathan and I had talked about doing a Gilmore Girls episode on my other, like my main webcast. But I don't care. I do it over here because it is a saga.
Yeah, bring me on. Bring me on. I have lots of thoughts on Chuck and Blair. Lots of thoughts.
Are you saying Chuck and Blair? That's a
Gossip Girl.
Gossip Girl. That's gossip.
Gilmore Girls. Oh, my bad.
Come on now.
I'm getting my
Getting your CW shows
GGs.
mixed up.
my GGs all thrown out.
And to strain my ignorance, I had no idea what you were talking about with Chuck and Blair.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's Gossip Girl.
Yeah, I watched like one
I'm an idiot.
season. That made me angry.
I'm an
But
idiot.
I've never seen either of them.
But again, yeah, I mean, honestly, on the plane Monday, like one of the few things that I could watch that was like short enough was like Gilmore Girls, like the first episode of A Year in the Life. And like, yeah, like honestly, it's a TV show, you know, which we would, this is technically a lit webcast, but like in something like this, I have no problem bringing in TV, obviously, because we're talking about the general idea of what makes a saga. And I would say Gilmore Girls makes that because it spans generations.
Yeah.
And it's like a, not only does it span generations, but it spans like close to half a lifetime for Rory, the youngest one. So yeah, Gilmore Girls, love it. Gossip Girl, I don't know though. If we're talking about Gossip Girl, like I didn't watch enough of that show. I watched like maybe half of the first season. I don't know.
Well, that's it's another episode for me to come back and talk about. When you're all caught up, we'll talk about the saga of Chuck and Blair.
Oh my gosh.
That one is the upsetting saga.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, it's just.
Although we're used to those with the Darkling and Alina and the Grishaverse right now. So, so I mean, we've kind of already delved into like, you know, our some of the sagas that we're into right now. And I think that, you know, we might come back to the real world stuff with like the true crime and our entire political situation in this country at the moment. But you know, I mean, to be honest, like what series brought literally all of us together? Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. Like Nick has not attended Ice and Fire Con, but I met him at Dragon Con before Ice and Fire Con ever even existed because we were cosplaying Jaime and Cersei. So
it's okay, Nick. We'll drag you there.
I have been trying to get him to come.
Oh, I'm not literally dragging, but okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll go like 4 hours out of my way to Raleigh and just pick him up and be like, "You're coming with us."
So yeah, bringing back to Ice and Fire. Honestly, probably one of the more modern examples of multiple sagas converging into one. A saga in best literary or similar literary terms would be extended character arc. So with Song of Ice and Fire, with Feast for Crows is a big one for seeing a lot of sagas come to a head. We see these characters over broken periods of time get pieces of their stories told. And from a historical point of view, that is as accurate to how a saga would have been told way back in the day. You'd get pieces of the story bit by bit by bit, and you'd have to weave the clues back together and fill in the blanks on your own creativity and time, which was a fun thing to do because sometimes you got to tweak a little bit and mess them around with other characters from other sagas, the world's first crossovers.
Yeah. I mean, well, and again, like a lot of times especially because they were told verbally, it would be a traveling, storyteller who would come to your village and tell you some bits, and then the whole point was like, I'm going to come back next time and tell you more, because they want like they were like often, like housed, fed, possibly even given, gifts and money and stuff for being there, because that was the only entertainment that people had. So it's definitely interesting to think of A Song of Ice and Fire as something like that, where we're getting bits and pieces as we go along, especially like you said with the later books like Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, where you're only getting like part of the story from each section of the world.
And then there are some character arcs where we're still waiting for them to converge, but we can pull into the debate of, okay, what about the show versus the book? And that's a good example of divergence in sagas and epics as well, where if you don't have all the pieces of the story set out, it can be completely different based on where you are and who's telling it. We have complete characters who are now completely different, and people will always see as completely different no matter how many times they read the actual source material, which is a shame. But what can we do?
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because you're talking about this idea that in a Song of Ice and Fire, especially with a feast and dance, you're seeing things from a certain individual's point of view. You're not seeing the whole picture, right? And George plays with that idea so much in the series, right? How history is kind of lost over time, or it's written by the winners, or how it's not always a complete reflection of what actually happened. And we're talking about this idea of verbal storytelling, and we have a great example in A Song of Ice and Fire with Old Nan, right? And her tales that she's telling are looked at as kind of like fairy tales, but everything she says is essentially like really happening or coming true, which I think is another interesting kind of thing to kind of delve into and play around when we're talking about what George is really saying about this, about the saga and about the way that information and history is told. To me, that's some of the most really the stuff that brings you back to George and makes it so interesting. And the other thing is the different layers in which you can, I know we're trying to look at Saga from a pretty broad definition, but in regards to his writing style and the way that everything, there's all these clues and there's normally 3 different hints, and you have all these opportunities to find it. It's a little bit of detective work. It's in my mind and in my humble opinion, it's one of the greatest sagas that's been put on pen to page. I'd put it up against just about anything.
Would you put it up against Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I
love Lord of the Rings. Tolkien, what he did for fantasy was amazing. The guy was a goddamn genius. Like we can, I don't think anybody would ever question that. But his stuff was very it was very influenced by his religion.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was also, it was a product of his time. And it's very like happy ending, like people are changed. Sure. Like characters are changed. Sure. Some characters die, not many. Not many important ones anyway. So I absolutely I love the Tolkien verse. I like The Hobbit. I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I could give or take literally anything else because the Silmarillion just makes me want to throw up. It's so boring. But I'm sorry. I tried so hard. It took me 3 years to read that book. Children of Hurin was better. It was definitely better than Silmarillion, but also that wasn't straight Tolkien. That was like his son or whatever finishing, his work. So I feel like there's a lot of things I love about Tolkien, but I also feel like he when you say would you put Song of Ice and Fire up against it, yeah, I would. I think it's better. I think and I say better. That's maybe not even the right word to use. Like more realistic.
I think George definitely pulled more of the realism of what life back then might have been like, whereas Tolkien was very much so, I'm going to stay away from the death and gore. Because you're right, he brought a lot of his own religion and beliefs into it. And he was also, if I remember correctly, most of The Hobbit he was reading as a bedtime story to his son, who was very young.
Yeah, I was super young when I read The Hobbit.
Yeah, he wrote The Hobbit as a children's book.
Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily call it a children's book like nowadays, but I feel like, him and C.S. Lewis were buds, like, and we all know, like, C.S. Lewis, like, the Chronicles of Narnia were absolutely like a saga, but like, again, very like heavily influenced by religion, and those I would say were far more children's books than The Hobbit ever was.
For sure. I mean, I think it's also interesting that George has kind of come out and said that he, wrote A Song of Ice and Fire with Tolkien kind of in mind, and he had some he was unhappy with some of the questions that were left unanswered. When Tolkien finished, I think famously he was like, well, what are the tax practices of, and it's the history that George puts into the books, into the characters, into the houses. I think that makes it such an amazing saga and really like helps kind of push it in my mind above, the Tolkien verse. If that's such a subjective thing. I know there's going to be people who disagree with that, but that's my take. And as far as kids' stories being pretty scary or pretty, I have this copy of Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales.
I was going to say Grimm's fairy tales are really dark.
Really dark.
I wouldn't call any of them sagas because they're very like contained things, but yeah, no, they're super, super dark. Yeah. But also those the Grimm's fairy tales that were told, hundreds of years ago, like the versions of those that we get now are just they're Disneyfied, candied up,
Totally. Yeah, no, but I mean the children's stories back then were much darker, is my point, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think they were
face to face.
It's getting off topic, but I think a lot of those Grimm's fairy tales were supposed to be warnings, essentially, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
which, to be honest, maybe some kids need.
Don't take candy from strangers.
I was to be honest, last weekend I was with my boyfriend for Halloween, and he has a daughter. She's not quite 14, and like. We're it was like during the day on Halloween, and she had a couple friends over, and we're sitting in the living room kind of doing our thing, and we're hearing them singing songs, and like first we hear them singing London Bridge is Falling Down, and we're like, what the hell are they doing? Then we hear them singing Ring Around a Rosie, and we're like, oh, they're singing creepy songs about death. That's cute. Right. But I guess like that, kids, that's what 14-year-olds do nowadays, I guess.
They like to be edgy.
They were probably making a TikTok of it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Probably right.
Guilty as charged.
Could have a special Grimm dance.
But I mean, so I guess, and this is like a personal preference for sure. Like I definitely have friends who prefer, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, like over Song of Ice and Fire. Not many of them, considering what I do for a living, but what I do for part of my living. But like, I definitely have met quite a few people, and I feel like nowadays we're almost meant. Like when it comes to modern sagas, like and maybe not like what we're talking about with TV, like Gilmore Girls or reality TV or whatever. Like, but when we're talking about like book series, like I don't know if I could say it started with Song of Ice and Fire, but I feel like we're led to believe that something has to be dark to be a saga. Like it has to be a little bit depressing. Because like I mean, I'll be honest, like I would call the Grishaverse, which we've been reading, a saga, and there's a lot of har darkness, pardon the pun, in that. For those of you who hadn't read, there's a character who literally controls darkness. So, but also like one of my favorite series, and I know Jonathan has read it as well. I don't know if anybody else has, but the Red Rising series, which is now definitely a saga because it's 5 books.
And counting.
And counting, yeah. Is super, super dark. And again, maybe this is just personal preference. I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Do you think that in like, and when I say modern, I'm talking about mid 90s to now? Like, are we like literally from like when Game of Thrones was published, sort of, until now? Like, do you think that we're led to believe that sagas need to be dark?
I would say yes, but only for the sake of the history of historically known sagas. We have the Mabinogion, we have King Arthur, we have the Epic of Gilgamesh. We have multiples from history that never really end well, because the happy stories don't really transfer well through history. They don't really teach a moralistic lesson, so they're not taught to the next generation as frequently. And over time, those happy stories will become more frequent, but less saga-ified. People, as terrible as it is, have a terrible dose of schadenfreude. And we want to see characters struggle like we struggle so that we can see them rise, or fall so we don't fall. And the darker times become, especially in like the 70s, the 80s, 60s through the 80s were a terrible time for like war stories. And you heard these life tales of soldiers, real world boys and men boys who became men far too soon, had their lives ripped out from under them long after they come home. And they can't really stomach the happy stories anymore. They'll listen to the other soldiers' tales and they'll feel at home again. They'll feel normal again. So I think as far as sagas go, we've normalized dark ending sagas because they make us feel more human. They make us feel more like this is more realistic. We can accomplish the good things that these characters accomplish too, and maybe get a different ending for ourselves.
I think, like, you bring up the like the 60s and 70s, and like the first thing that came to mind, don't hate me, y'all, is like, is Forrest Gump a saga? It is.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
Like, it is. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I know some people don't. The movie did not age well. Okay, we'll put it that way. But then so many things from the 90s didn't.
One
And
that you would Tara, Big Fish.
Oh God, I love Big Fish.
Big Fish is absolutely a
Same.
saga.
Yeah.
Have we all seen Big Fish?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If you
No.
haven't, do it.
Oh, Jonathan.
It's a Jonathan. It's a Tim Burton movie. It's got Ewan McGregor in it.
I don't know how I missed it then.
You probably
Sure.
saw it, honestly, but it came out at kind of an odd time, I feel like, and it was not. I honestly felt like it wasn't. And maybe this was just among my circle, because like, it came out when I was in college. So like I felt like among my circle of friends, it was not like respected, and I just loved it so much. And it wasn't until years later that I found like years and years, like really with my convention, but it's like, oh, you like Big Fish? I love Big Fish. Like, but the whole thing is there's a father who's dying, who's telling a tall tale of his life, and it is it's a hero's journey in a way, for sure. It definitely spans generations, because it's a father telling his tale to his son, and it's I don't know, it's really good. If you haven't seen Big Fish, definitely watch Big Fish. Like,
Well, here's a question then, and I don't mean to keep pulling it away from the literary world, but if Big Fish is a saga, is The Notebook a saga? And I think the answer is a resounding yes.
Yep.
yeah, probably.
In kind of just jumping off topic of that, then Shelby, I don't want to keep looking at things through the lens of the hero's journey, but I think it's important. When we're talking about the question is, does a saga have to be dark? You can go back and look at that hero's journey, and a big part of the hero's journey was this transformation. They go through a trial, and normally there's some sort of device or decisive win. They come back, change, and then they use the knowledge that they've learned to help the people that they return back to. So in some degree, like going back to this archetype of the hero's journey, it kind of has been for a long time. There has been aspects of dark, or at least there has to be some outward force that at least causes stress on the hero or the anti-hero.
Yeah, absolutely. like you said, it's the hero's journey doesn't have to end badly, and we've seen it so many times where it does end good. Big Fish, in my opinion, is one that does end well, and it's one that was beautifully done, because the whole time you think it's the father's epic that he's telling, and he's instead weaving this epic for his son to follow and make a new ending. And it's a positively ended story with a transformation, like you said. And I wish we had more like that that survived through time, because we see so much of it in our modern movies, the typical happy ending.
Right.
Disney movies, especially, as much as Disney is an interesting street to follow. Aladdin is probably one of my favorites. As far as hero's tale and technically sagas, not really, but kind of mini saga.
Well, I mean, Aladdin in and of itself may not like the Disney Aladdin, but where it comes
Arabian
from,
Nights.
the Arabian Nights is. I mean, I don't know. Well, I don't know if those would necessarily be considered sagas because they were self-contained like stories.
Mini sagas.
Yeah.
Or in like the Nordic tradition, just a long story.
Yeah. Ow.
So other than like Lord of the Rings, which is obvious, Song of Ice and Fire, which we clearly all like, we're just ignoring Game of Thrones as a TV show for now because like I feel like it did something really well for a while and then
season
Watched it.
yeah. But any other like do you guys have any other like things that have come out in and when I say recent, I mean I don't know, within our lifetimes, like we're all varied ages here, so
I mean I think my favorite is one that I wish more people read. It's called the Pelennor series or the Pelennor Saga, and it's just a gorgeous book. It's based on an ancient tale of the Star Children from, I want to say Morocco or Eastern Europe, but it's super fun. It's bards and magic and fantasy, but it's also very heavy realism. Death is very much present if you look just the wrong way. I really recommend it.
I feel like I've heard that name before. What are some of the book titles?
There are 4 books in the series, and the first book is The Naming, and then The Riddle, and The Crow, and The Singing. Okay, yeah. That was actually one of the books. The Naming was one of the books that was like on one of our Ice and Fire Con surveys for book club, which I've neglected terribly and need to get back to because like now we've had to postpone the con again. So, but yeah, no, the Naming, I actually own that book because I wasn't sure. I was like, oh God, which one are people going to vote for? I better buy all of these that I don't have already. I mean, Nick, I would like to hear, Nick made this note. I would like to hear your argument for Animal Crossing being a saga because you say it's not really, but maybe it is because there are how many different versions of Animal Crossing? Oh, wow.
I mean, it's a game, but I can make the argument Red Dead Redemption is a saga, so it absolutely is. So, like, I want to hear the Animal Crossing saga argument, if there is one. Oh, no, we can't hear you. Oh, you're muted. That's why. There you go.
Fixed.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
God. So, I've been playing, as I think many people have, a lot of Animal Crossing over the pandemic, and even if you excluded the other games, which you certainly don't have to, there's this whole world that's been created, but you're really creating your own little like insulated story that people, your islanders are reacting to you. You're building out all these stories with them. Relationships are being built. I'm not sure about the fall, although certainly many
Every
people,
time you get into debt to Tom Nook.
or
That's
you
the
pull
fall.
another sea bass out of the water. We've all felt that pain. But I do think that there's like this really interesting storytelling that's happening. And I personally am fascinated by this kind of like culture that's built up in the pandemic around Animal Crossing, because so many of my friends, even if they didn't have a Switch, they bought a Switch so that they could get Animal Crossing so that we could like visit each other's islands and share all this information with each other. And it's also really interesting how like the way that you interact with other people's islanders then impacts their island and impacts you. I love it. It's fascinating. And it's not necessarily the same kind of like narrative story of here's a beginning, middle, and end, but it is really building something that is pretty cool.
I mean, yeah, I agree that there's definitely rises and fall, like they happen constantly, because again, like every time you have to add another room to your house, you get into debt to Tom Nook, and then you got to figure out a way to pay it off. You want to build a bridge on your island. None of those villagers are helping you. They're all just like children, and you're the parent, like paying for everything.
And I don't know how many people played during the Halloween event, but they gave Tom Nook like little imp horns, like little devil horns. And it was just like, mwah,
I can't believe I missed
chef's
this.
kiss, beautiful. Time travel to Halloween because you've got to experience.
I honestly time traveled back to October 1st. Because I had not been on Animal Crossing in like 2 months. So I time traveled back to October 1st like a week ago, and I was like,
I love it.
I mean, but nothing was happening on my island Halloween. Like, I don't know if it was early or whatever, but I was just like, nothing was really happening. But also, I hadn't been on in so long. Like, I feel like I've kind of lost the Animal Crossing like vibe. Like, I don't know.
It's definitely hard to keep that going.
I was every day
yeah,
for months and months, and now I'm like, do I really still need to pay for Nintendo Online? Because like, that's it's like $8.
Nick, calling into the Animal Crossing, like all of us are right now, what do you think of the idea that the main character, the player character, may be the storyteller instead of the main character of the epic? Some of the characters that keep reoccurring, we have the original Mayor Tortimer, we have Tom Nook, we have Red, we have Isabel, we have and some villagers that span different games. We hear more pieces of their long-term story. What do you think about the idea that we as the villager, and therefore the one hearing all the different stories, are becoming the storyteller?
I love that concept. I think that's it reminds me of, it's certainly not well, I mean, I think it's becoming a saga of sorts. The Patrick Rothfuss Name of the Wind series, and the main character there being kind of the narrator, listening to, I actually don't know how to pronounce the
Kvoth.
Kvoth.
I always pronounced it Kvoth.
Kvoth.
Kvoth, like a soft V.
I like that. Okay.
I could be wrong though.
So you're really getting their story from the perspective of the narrator who's listening to the story happening, or being told rather. So I love the idea that your sort of like player character is actually
the bard.
Yeah, exactly. And not just because I love that character class in Dungeons and Dragons.
Speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, let's pull that in.
Boom! Yes, I was in a 6-year campaign, 100% of Saga.
Absolutely, I would too. I would actually go so far as to say it is multiple sagas converging, a lot like Game of Thrones is. We have each individual character, we have every NPC who is going through their own journey and influenced by all the bullfuckery that whatever the player characters choose to do. And then you have character journeys within the player characters themselves, all the backstory eggs coming back to bite them. It's D&D can very easily, depending on your DM and how you play, can be either an epic or a saga. I would say with the sagas, you're actually trying to make a character. You're trying to make a real life, not a real life person, but like a realistic character. With an epic, you're just superhero man or murder hobo who just has sticks to one way of life. So I guess like the different classifications of player type are a fun way to define, how would you see yourself, or how do you play your saga out? Are you someone who takes down every single obstacle and adversary in your way, no matter the cost? You're a murder hobo. Or are you someone who sticks to every single rule of law and tries to find the loopholes around it? You're a rules lawyer. Things like that. Or are you the aggressor, the antagonist in the campaign, who will push the other people in your life to work on their sagas before ever touching your own, pushing their buttons until they push their journey forward, kind of being an asshole in doing so, but still. So, like, depending on how we play our characters can determine how their sagas are built, which is freaking great.
I'm really, I never considered games in the realm of sagas or epics. You guys raised some interesting questions in my mind. What about the game Shardy McDennis? How does that, is that a saga?
Never played.
Never played?
I have
No,
no
Well,
idea what you're talking
First
about.
of all, this is an It's Always Sunny reference.
Yeah, it is.
Oh.
It's a great game. It's a fantastic game. I personally think you can make the argument it is a saga.
You could
But-
probably make the argument that it is, but I
Maybe not a
don't
strong
think
argument.
it's a solid argument. Like
Fair enough.
Shardy McDennis is like, I'm trying to. How would you describe it to somebody who knows nothing about?
It's a game of wits. It's a game of strength. It's a game of perseverance.
You can't just say what they say in the TV show.
I don't know if that's how they say it, but I mean, I think that's a fair description of the game. And it's also a game of intoxication. So I don't know.
It is.
It's
One of
the
my
game.
favorite games.
Yeah, it's the game I most want to play in life. That I haven't
in real
played.
life, yeah.
Yeah, in real life. I
So
really wanted
I mean,
to.
it's like there's two teams, right? Two teams,
Right.
and
There are
they
multiple.
each have like their own rules.
So yeah, and there's different stages. So the first stage may be chance, the second stage may be physical pain endurance, and the second or the third stage might be trivia or intelligence or something along those lines. I'm mixing them up a little bit, but in between the stages, there are also these demonstrations of aggression, demonstrations of civility, and with basically every board game you can think of, kind of combined into one. It's one of my favorite episodes of Always Sunny. So if you're not familiar, I would, again, it's another suggestion from Uncle.
Scott in the chat says he'd say it's not. I agree. I think it might combine different board games and have some elements, but like I don't think it could be considered a saga. Like when I think of games being a saga, I'm thinking of like, I mean, a lot of D&D can be, depending on who's playing, for sure. I personally have never gotten. Unfortunately, I played like a one-off, like a one-shot D&D game, and I played another one that was supposed to last longer, but only lasted like 3 weeks, and then our DM quit, so I just never got back into it. Like when I think of, I mean, I can definitely name video games. Like I think Last of Us is a saga. Red Dead Redemption, like I mentioned earlier, absolutely. I mean, Red Dead Redemption is like the pure definition of a saga, like a Western saga, because the first game starts in like 1911, and it follows John Marston throughout his essentially like his hero's journey, because he is been arrested, and they're like releasing him, and they're saying like, you have to go take out your old gang members or we're gonna like do in your wife and kid. So the whole game is him going back and facing his past, and meeting friends along the way and stuff, and he like helps like the Mexican Revolution, and he helps this like girl like with her ranch and everything, and then in the end, like, I'm not gonna say what happened in the end, but like, so that's the first game. But the second game is the prequel to that, where it shows how John Marston got his scars. But you're not playing John, you're playing Arthur, and the whole game, the vast majority of the game until the epilogue follows Arthur, and you can choose how to play him. You can choose to play him as as honorable or dishonorable, but no matter how you choose to play him, the end result is essentially the same. the gang, it's the story of the gang falling apart, which you already know happens because of how Red Dead Redemption, like the original game that came out in 2010 is. But this is why Rockstar takes 1 billion years to build a game, because they build a beautiful story. I mean, the voice actors for Red Dead Redemption 2 were working on this game for 5 years. This was their full-time job for 5 years. So I mean, I don't cry much at video games, and I'll tell you what, I cried at both of these, at both the original Red Dead and Red Dead 2. So games can for sure be, and again, Last of Us is another one. But I think, well, D&D, like that again, like I said, it depends on who you're playing it with.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I don't think anything that I ever did with D&D was going to turn into some sort of saga, but
that's okay.
A longer, game than a one shot, or the one that lasts like 3 hours.
If I wasn't DMing a game almost every day, Tara, I'd make a new one just for the Ice and FireCon fam, and we'd do something.
Trust me, if I had time for that show.
Just this group.
Crusader Kings, I think,
100%.
would also be another one.
That's what I was
would
thinking
be a
of
saga.
as Tara was talking it. 100%.
Crusader Kings. Is it there's an ASWAF
mod for that? Yeah.
mod for that. Yeah.
Aesop,
there
and
is.
then Dragon Age, the Dragon Age trilogy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, back on topic.
Topic. Books.
It's all on topic.
I know.
It's all absolutely. Listen. This is technically a lit podcast or webcast, but yeah, I mean that doesn't change the fact that something doesn't have to be read to be a saga. Again,
Yeah, absolutely.
Star Wars. I guess sure you can read Star Wars, but let's be real, especially the original trilogy, the way to really experience it is to see it in the original trilogy version.
Well, and again, not to bring it back to the hero's journey, but George Lucas, I think, has straight up acknowledged that the hero's journey was a huge influence for Star Wars.
Oh, for sure.
The idea of Luke Skywalker, I mean, specifically, is going through almost all 17 steps of Campbell's hero's journey. It's a really good example of that.
Yeah. Bleh. Okay, what? Sorry, my brain is on whiskey and not enough of it, so it's starting to that.
My brain is on wine.
I prescribe more whiskey.
Yeah, it's not quite. It's not too much. It might actually not be enough. So I mean, I guess other than games, Avatar was something that that Nick had mentioned as well, and also a perfect example because it's a comic book, or would it be called manga? I think it's still comic book because it's not. Avatar was never.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
canon.
I would
it was
say
never
it's more
true anime.
a graphic novel series.
Yeah, graphic novels. But I mean, Avatar and then Korra. I guess in a way you could make an argument that it's an epic rather than a saga, but I think it's probably still a saga.
I'd say each individual is a saga of its own, of a greater epic.
Okay.
Yeah, I would totally buy that.
It's like arc versus universe.
And I mean, because I'm rewatching Korra right now, it's it makes me so sad that they never knew if they were going to get another season, so they made each season its own contained story, whereas with the original Avatar series it was this overarching just all, oh my gosh, everything just added up to
Yeah.
It's hard to think of a series that is as self-contained and well told as Avatar is,
because even the filler episodes were amazing. And to be honest, I will make the argument that Star Wars Rebels is on almost the same level.
Yeah,
I
almost.
would almost agree.
I like almost, like not quite, but almost. And some of that is because there were some filler episodes and weird stuff that happened in Star Wars, and also it's part of Star Wars, so it's like with Avatar, it's like, yes, there's this bigger world, and of course Korra comes after, but like Avatar: The Last Airbender itself was just a beautifully told little series, and not even little. I mean, how many seasons is it? 4, 5?
Avatar was 3.
Mm-hmm.
It was only 3.
Yeah.
Was it just a lot of episodes per season?
Yeah.
This one, they had 20-something episodes per season.
It was 3 books, and it was like 20 to 40 episodes per season.
For some reason, I thought it was longer than that.
Yeah, because he already knew airbending, and then water was the first book, then earth,
Mm-hmm.
then fire.
Yep. Also, best character redemption of all time.
Zuko.
Oh,
Yeah. No one does it better.
absolutely.
I mean, my dog is named Saga. So
Yes.
and he is
The
such
good
a
boy.
nutball too. He is Saga in a nutshell. Even though right now he's strangely PTFO. I feel like it's only 8 o'clock right now because of the time change, and these dogs should be going nuts, but they are just passed out.
I need to get Sokka some like tiny cactuses for next Halloween.
There's like an Avatar like food or dog food or water bowl on Box Lunch that I have been eyeing for
Oh
like
my
weeks
gosh.
now, and I'm like, I can't really spend this money on a bowl that my dog doesn't need, but also doesn't he need it? I think it's because my cabbage is in it or something.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna make Sokka. I'm gonna dress Sokka up as the cabbages guy next year for Halloween.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my
Make
goodness.
Ellie-
Dean has a cat named Appa.
Wow.
This happened before I happened. It's a white cat with a gray A on it, like a gray like triangle on its forehead.
Oh,
He's very bad though. He's very bad.
that doesn't sound like Appa.
He's very scared of like literally everything that exists in life, and he hides all the time. And sometimes he'll just like come out and cry at like 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning for no good reason. And he's like 3 or 4 years old, and they've had him since he was a tiny little kitten. But
Oh.
he's a bad cat. I'm gonna fix it, or I'm just gonna bring my cat Marmalade with me to their house, and Marmalade's gonna beat the ever loving shit out of him and fix it for me because she's a bitch. I know that sounds really rude, but my cat is mean.
I mean,
She's
gotta
right
do what you
there.
gotta do.
She's right there. She's a calico female cat. They're all mean.
Speaking of Appa, let's bring it back to, or my brain is jumping to Appa's Lost Days in Avatar.
Oh my god. Don't make me cry.
I know, but hear me out. That is probably one of my favorite examples of an epic, or specifically a saga does not have to be a character who can speak. It does not have to be a human character. A saga is a character's journey fully from their journey, saga equivalent to journey. And we see Appa undergo a massive transformation. Granted, it broke all of our hearts, and I cannot watch that filler arc without dying inside.
And what episode? There was an episode that came like right after that was also really sad. I can't remember which one it was, but it was like, I remember rewatching it this summer and being like, how do you follow Appa's Lost Days with this shit? Like,
was it the Iroh filler?
The Tales of Bossing
Tales of
Say.
Bossing
oh
Say.
yes, it was. It was. It was Appa's Lost Days followed by Tales of Bossing Say, where you're just like, Iroh and his son.
And that's something I think Avatar: The Last Airbender succeeds so fully as an epic series, as well as multiple sagas. Each filler is a different character's saga piece, and that one fully cinched in everything we didn't already know about Iroh. We get more of what he's lost. We finally see the tragedy in his life. Not that he wasn't chosen for Fire Lord, but the loss of his son and how deeply it impacted him. We see the cruelties of the world of Avatar against animals and animal kind, no matter how rare, both in Appa's Lost Days and in Korra. I don't want to spoil Terra, and I don't know.
Oh, I've seen the whole thing, but we do have people watching who haven't seen all of it. So,
Okay.
because keep in mind, it wasn't readily available until like a couple months ago.
I will say, without spoiling, that the bison are commonly a target of animal cruelty, and they are always, almost always, whenever a bison shows up, character journey is happening. So be it for the bison.
Right. There's that whole, oh my gosh, there's that whole Korra episode with the baby bison.
Baby bisons.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever there is a natural force, be it mostly the bison, we see it, but we also see it when the badger moles are mentioned. We see it when the dragons are mentioned. If there's a pull of nature, which I've noticed in a lot of mythological sagas, if nature gets involved, you're changing. You don't get a choice. You're changing, better or worse. It might cause your death, but death is a change. So.
I mean, in a way that kind of brings us back to Song of Ice and Fire and like Bran and the warging. I mean, well, not just Bran, but mainly Bran and the warging.
Well, and it's the idea of like these archetypal symbols, right? I think is what you're kind of like talking about, Shelby, with the bison a little bit. And Tara, you bring up Bran, which I think is right on the money. I was just reading Bran's chapter where he meets the three-eyed crow for the first time, right? And you have this, he's down in the cave with the children, and he sees this very narrow bridge, and there's a moment where he thinks he has to cross the narrow bridge, and they say, no, look behind you, basically, and you see blood raven woven into the tree, and the thing is that there's this archetypal symbol. The narrow bridge kind of symbolizes a tough journey ahead, and what we know, if I know we don't want to really use the show's later seasons, to guide us too much in guessing what's happening in the book. But I think we can at least gather that, Bran's probably not staying at that tree. He's probably going south, and that journey is not going to be easy. I think, we can all agree upon that. So, so you have these ideas, and, in the Song of Ice and Fire is littered with them all over, where you have, symbols, these archetypal symbols kind of giving us hints as to what's going to happen. And another reason as to what makes it one of the greater sagas out there.
Absolutely. You have the archetypal that if these certain things show up, there's going to cause change. And then you have the other things that it's like a red death flag. Please don't do that. That's a sign you're going to die. Please stop.
A pomegranate.
Every fucking time there's a pomegranate.
Right.
A peach.
A peach. Yeah.
So essentially, if they're eating a round fruit, they're going to die.
I mean, is it round fruit or is it fruit? Is it like I don't know? Peaches have pits. Pomegranates have a lot of seeds.
Well, pomegranates go back to Greek mythology, right? And they're supposed to, kind of be a symbol for.
Yeah, they were the people of the world.
Yep. So it's kind of this idea that there's a falsehood going on as well.
And the only reason I don't say the only reason I say round fruit, not fruit in general, is whenever we see some fruits like strawberries or grapes, typically that means they go and do another kind of activity. So definitely, archetypal symbols are something that's going to be present in sagas. But the question I want to ask, why do you guys think that is? Because in my brain, these are kind of drawing back to the oral tradition of wanting to give some power to the listener as well as power to the creator, cluing in the listener as to what may be coming for next time, a symbol of foreshadowing. Or, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it's, to go back and talk about, archetypal symbolism, I think you kind of almost have to take a step back and talk about some of Joseph Campbell's influences, and we're talking about Carl Jung now. And the idea of the collective unconscious and the foundation of the collective unconscious is archetypes, right? You have all these archetypes, the relationship between a father and child is the father archetype, the mother and child, death, birth, power, all this, wealth. There's all these archetypes. And, I guess if you believe in the collective unconscious, right, you believe that the foundation of that are these archetypes. And so that's where it kind of comes, at least in my mind, the importance of it and why you see it. But yeah, I think it's kind of also a really easy answer to say psychology a little bit.
I mean, I didn't get to say this when we were talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, but like, I just feel like this Cabbages guy, like that's a saga right there.
He
He
is a saga.
appears so many times throughout
Absolutely
the
is.
series. Like his life is constantly getting just like upended. Literally, his life is getting literally, not figuratively, literally his life is getting upended. I don't know.
And doesn't he get an empire in the end? Like, doesn't he get a cabbage corporate empire?
There's like a thing in Korra, yeah,
Mhm.
where they like, yeah, I think that's what we're supposed to believe.
That's so funny.
Certainly allusions to it.
My cat is going crazy. Can you hear him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He wants to come say hi.
He
Yeah.
came in. He's not even in the room. He's like 2 rooms away right now, and that's how loud he
Wow.
is.
That's impressive.
My cat is his own saga. His name is
Really?
Ducky. Yeah, I could tell you his story, but it's long and involved.
That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, it's a whole episode, the saga of Ducky. I mean, gosh, we've talked about so much stuff here. Is there anything else you guys want to mention? Because I mean, at this point, like, I know there's stuff that we've glossed over or haven't brought up at all. I mean, it's kind of hard because, again, like, there's the definition of saga can be so generic now, especially nowadays. I mean, I was literally thinking, like, you know, TV, like we joked about like Gilmore Girls and Gossip Girl and everything, but like Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, like I don't want to get into detail about these, but they're absolutely sagas of their own. So,
And I will never take a chance to praise Babylon 5 for those who have not watched it. Granted, the special effects are dated, but that is the ultimate in space opera saga on TV.
Oh, I have
That's
a
one of
lot
those-
of friends who say that, like, you know, yeah, it's dated and weird at times, but like they're like friends that I trust, including you, who praise, you know, how good it is. So
I guess the last 2 things I would want to say is a saga will always have a name attached. The saga of this person, that person, this character, this real life person, where an epic is typically the journey itself or the adventure, no matter who's in it. The second thing, drawing back to Game of Thrones, if you guys have not had a chance to read the original Mabinian, which is the Welsh mythology books that most of us know as King Arthur stories, as well as the old Welsh myths, many of them in the original Welsh Mabinian, as well as the translated Mabinian, there's a lot of parallels to some of the things we see in Game of Thrones. One of the most popular myths is the myth of Pwyll, who was just a prince who thought he was hot shit. He insulted a god, and the god said, okay, you get to be king for a day, or I kill you. And we see that with Ned. It's, okay, you are this, well, not so much that you're hot shit, but I'd like to put you in this position of power for a day to see what you can do. And we see Ned put all the morality and all the justice of his world into ruling a world that he's never known. And we see the consequence directly of that. And almost the identical same thing happens to Pwyll in the Mabinian. He puts his morals on the world of the Fae, and he's killed for it. So if you haven't read the Mabinian or haven't had a chance to do so, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I don't think I've read like the original one. I've definitely read some like old King Arthur tales. I mean, I don't think a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court counts.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. It's Mark Twain. It counts.
Well, I don't think I've read it either, or any of the the original text, but I have listened to Lady Gwyn of Radio Westeros go quite in depth into some of the Arthurian parallels to A Song of Ice and Fire, and I find them super intriguing. I think I'm interested to hear kind of what everyone thinks, or what their reasons are for why we're so drawn to sagas.
Shopping Friday.
I think it depends on the saga that the version of because listen, like the saga as it was presented to people originally, hundreds, thousands of years ago is not necessarily the same thing that we consider a saga now. But I think that long-term character growth is certainly part of it. I think with series like Song of Ice and Fire and Red Rising, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, even with Red Dead Redemption, weirdly enough, like it's these characters might not be suffering in the ways that in the Grishaverse too. Like they may not be. It's not the same type of suffering, but you can place that suffering with things that you have experienced or seen people experience. I mean, I know like with the Grishaverse, some of the things that we talked about in the first couple of episodes was the abusive relationship aspects, like the narcissistic, the abusive relationship aspect of the Grishaverse is strong in those novels, and it continues through the third. So like it's for those of us who have experienced that sort of. Now, I mean, obviously not that exact situation, but for those, you can see the parallels between real life, like abusive relationships with narcissists and what happens in those novels. And I think, I mean, I think a lot of it is there's differences, obviously, because like, and with the Song of Ice and Fire, it's the same way. Like, this isn't real life. Of course, we know that, but we see these people. I mean, Brienne is a great example. This woman who she's just not pretty. Okay. She's not pretty. She's amazing. She's amazing in her own right, but she's not pretty. And in our world, it's the same as it is there. You know what I mean? Like you can be this strong, like, talented, amazing woman, but if you're not conventionally attractive, like you're still gonna have a hard time of it. Maybe not quite like Brienne did, but like there is a lot of, if you can place yourself in the character's shoes, and I think that's my argument with Twilight is like, okay, sure, so like some of us were like, whoever was that girl who was like not really attractive according to literally everybody that met her, and super awkward according to everybody that met her, including herself, but like still like every super attractive dude in the world like fell over like head over heels for her. Like that does not happen.
I don't know.
It doesn't happen.
As a non-attractive person who has lots of attractive persons falling head over heels for them, it happens.
It happens.
It happens occasionally.
No. I'm not just talking about her attractiveness. No. I'm talking about her general, like she says she's not. She says she's plain. She says she's she trips over. She's clumsy. She's not super smart. Like there's nothing like everything we hear, and I guess some of it is that maybe it's her own internal monologue is just really degrading to herself, which I guess as a woman, I know how that can be at 16 or whatever. But I mean, it's like we're literally led to believe that this girl is like, she's just like this super like average to below average person, but like, and she's not nice to people. Like that's the thing. Like I totally get like I mean, you say you're not super attractive or whatever, but like there's a level of attractiveness that comes from a person just being a kind person or a funny person. Like I'll be honest, like most of the guys I've dated in my life, people have looked at me and been like, why are you dating that dude? And it's like, because I like him, because he's funny, because he's smart, because he's fun to be around. Like, I don't know, like he might not be attractive to you, but he is attractive to me because I like his personality. And I just, and Becca, God, what's her name?
Bella.
Bella, thank you, Becca. Sorry, my friend Becca. I don't know why I said Becca. And
God,
Bella,
I wish her name was Becca.
there's
Yeah,
like
that'd be so much better.
Becky. There's no personality. There's nothing. You know, like, and I just. I guess it's one of those like insert yourself into the fantasy things, and that's why I argue that it's not really a saga.
Yeah, a very weak saga, if anything.
Didn't we start with Twilight?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm so angry about Twilight. It's never
It
gonna
all
not
comes
be.
back to Twilight.
Alpha and
We
Omega.
can jump over to say Howl's Moving Castle, the book, not the movie. The multiple books it spans, we see the conventionally unattractive and very crass and rude Howl get all of his shit rocked by a hat maker. And we come to that unreliable narrator where a lot of people right now who have seen both movie and books are saying, okay, well, what if the books were Sophie's version and what if the movies were Howl's? Which I think is neat, but
Yeah.
a viewpoint can change the story drastically. I agree full-heartedly, Tara. Bella is the worst female heroine to ever grace any kind of literature.
Are you sure?
One of the worst. But I think she was very much so built to be the blank slate of how teenage girls in America view themselves. And they just want to find that one person who loves them. But in that same vein, we have, I'm very biased in teenage literature because I am a female. And I'm trying to think of the books I've read. Dorian Gray is one of my personal favorites. We see Dorian experience one of the most tragic and yet uplifting stories, and we find out it's not even his fucking story. It's Basil's story. It's Basil learning to overcome all of this by watching his friends suffer because of his own bullshit. And for many young men who found themselves enamored with their own images, with how they viewed themselves in society, Jekyll and Hyde is another one. These were absolute turnabout changes in young men when they were written and well after, who saw themselves as, you must be perfect for society's sake. You have to be strong and beautiful and influential and politically accurate. And instead, it was breaking these boys inside so that their souls corrupted. So, having Dorian Gray and the saga of Dorian Gray and the saga of, what's another one? Aragon. Aragon was a wonderful saga for young men and young women when it came out, which the movies wrecked. But you know what? Movie, not movies.
I want to go back to Dorian Gray and how not far and Jekyll and Hyde and how not far we've come from there.
I know.
And
But a
show
lot of that is society being dicks.
Yep. Society is a bunch of dicks.
Yeah. And I'm super curious, Shelby, in your take on Orpheus as well, which is my favorite Greek myth.
Okay. So
yeah,
I could go on for ages. We're going to be here till midnight. Orpheus, the story of Orpheus himself is probably one of the absolute saddest myths.
Yes.
When you take Greek culture into account. This is a boy who literally could not lift up a stone. He could not pick up sword. The idea of fighting disgusted him so much he would puke, but he fell in love with one of the most beautiful women who accepted him as he was. Just knowing that, no matter how rich this boy was, Orpheus was likely ridiculed, isolated, thrown to the literal, very possibly literal, bears and lions, just because he didn't want to join the army. He didn't want to join the political sphere. He just wanted to sing and praise the muses who were his parents. And he falls in love for it, and it causes him so much grief and pain and anguish. And then it kind of turns back. And yes, his music gives him a chance to save the woman he loves, but his curiosity and that which made him different is what destroyed him in the end. And to think of that mindset in ancient Grecian culture is so devastating. Young boys were probably like, oh, I love the harp. I love music. I want to be a poet. I want to sing like Orpheus. And then they hear the entirety of the story and say, never mind. one
Whoops.
toga and one philosophy book, please.
Yeah.
And,
And
it's
again,
like,
look how far we've come.
look how far we've come. Like,
Well,
we're just crap. Humans are crap.
Agreed.
I mean, listen, like the world at large, there are certain areas of it that have come very far, but
Yeah.
this country maybe not.
No.
E-
As a society, technologically, literarily, we've advanced leaps and bounds. The ability to speak out about these injustices has absolutely advanced. We can talk without getting killed now. But as a psychological whole, we've never come past the first agricultural age.
I think that's actually like a really cool place to like tie it back in and like maybe wrap things up. Like,
Yeah, no,
I think that's part of what draws us to epics, like going back to that idea, and that you know, as we continue to grow and evolve, these are still some of the like core principles that really resonate for us. And that's why we are still fascinated by them. That's why we're still creating them, because there are still parts of it that, you know, even those old tales that you would think maybe centuries later we've gotten to a place where boys can play with harps and it's cool. We're still not there, and there's still people who are resonating with those kind of core ideas, and I think that's both really beautiful and you know, obviously also sad.
A woman should be able to be queen and never be criticized, and a man should be able to pick up ballet shoes or play the most beautiful music and be praised for it. And we're just not there.
1000%.
We're just not there.
Yep.
Well, I think also like no matter who you are, the idea that people can change is like it's like lifted up on a pedestal. Like you always want to believe that people can change, right? And that is kind of the key point of any good saga, is that the people or person in most cases changes and evolves, like and it's kind of they might backtrack for sure at one point or another, but the end result is they're supposed to change because of their life experiences, which is how everything should happen in real life. And let's be real, like most people do. I mean, to be honest, I was raised as a super conservative Baptist, and I don't think I ever necessarily, I don't remember ever really like latching on to some of the worst parts of that. But like, I know that when I went to college and had got an education, like a real education, not my like tiny small town, you know, I went to a public school, but it was still like a tiny small town public school where there were literally like, I'm pretty sure 4 people of color in my school the entire time I was there, the entire 4 years. You know, so like growing up and leaving your comfort zone and going out and getting like an actual real education, like that changes it should change a person.
For sure, and that's representative. You know, I mentioned Carl Jung, the collective unconscious earlier, but he talks about that, where the collective unconscious is something that we use, you know, until we develop our own persona, and then, you know, life experience gives us that, and we kind of get away from the collective unconsciousness and start, you know, drawing on our own personal experience. And I think, you know, you don't have to believe in that, but it's something that I think, I don't believe in everything or subscribe to everything he says, but you know, that's one aspect that I think he kind of was definitely hitting the nail on the head with.
And yeah, I think in that respect, like in much smaller ways, anybody who grows and learns as they age, they're living their own, you know, saga, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Which
yes,
is why
yes.
we relate to them so well, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
For those who want to change, those who have been forced to change, or those who are seeking their change, a saga is first and foremost ours to write.
Yes, this is true. Heart fingers. So any like quick last thoughts before I wrap this up, y'all?
No.
Oh,
Thank you guys so much for joining. So just for future reference, we'll be back next week, which we weren't really planning on, but we'll be back next week with myself, Nick, Jonathan, and Nami to talk about Siege and Storm, which is the second book in the Grisha trilogy, which if you haven't read the Grishaverse books or any of Leigh Bardugo's novels, I highly suggest reading them. The Grisha book, the Grisha trilogy is pretty YA, but like her later stuff is much, it's not that. And even the Grisha books are when I say they're YA, I'm not a big YA person myself, but they're quality. So other future sagas that we are absolutely going to cover, Red Rising. I'm not really sure if we're going to do Red Rising first. I think we might do the Books of Babel first because they're less like well known, and I really I know the author personally, and they're quality. But Red Rising, The Books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft. Another YA series that I'm thinking of doing is the Serafina duology, which has like a third add-on book called Test of the Road. It's very LGBT friendly, like very, 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 which I love. And then other ones we're considering, the Gentleman Bastard series, which is Scott Lynch. Yeah. Maybe the Expanse series, but that one is very expensive. Ha ha ha. Like so many books, my God.
That will take a year.
Yeah, for real it will. The King Killer Chronicle is another one. Like I would love to do the Brandon Sanderson. Oh my God, is that Brandon Sanderson? Is his last name Sanderson? And now I'm like, am I thinking the Sanderson sisters? Shit. I've drank a lot of wine. You know what I'm talking about. You know the oh my God. The big books, The Way of Kings, like those novels, like, but they're like way long. Like, I don't think I could even read them again anytime soon, y'all. They're so heavy. But yeah, so we've got so many things lined up, but we won't even finish with the Grishaverse books until like April. So, and then we'll break for like a month. And pick up whatever our next series is going to be. So yeah, so if you have not read Leigh Bardugo's books, please pick them up. And Stormlight Archives, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. Scott comes in on the chat with the win. Stormlight Archives, thank you. Brandon, it was Sanderson. I was like, oh my God, am I just in Halloween mind and thinking like Hocus Pocus? It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. So yeah. Like we've got so many things lined up, but if you have not read the Grishaverse books, like, and you like, just pick them up, honestly. Like I'm calling them YA, but like, have you read them, Shelby?
No, currently my obsession is rereading the Pelennor series and then doing the Children of Air series by Holly Black. So
okay.
Who reads the? Who wrote the Pelennor series?
Alison Krogan.
Okay.
She actually retranslated the original Bardic epic and the original Bardic saga of the Star Children into these books.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I reread as I'm rereading them. I'm like, maybe I should actually read, the notes ahead of that are in front of the book. And I'm like, oh shit, this was an ancient story. Okay.
So I mean, but Jonathan and Nick, you guys are both enjoying the Grisha books, correct?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Or I should say I am. You shouldn't speak for Nick.
You speak my mind, Jonathan.
I do have to pop off, so.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll close this out, you guys. Thomas, any last thoughts?
Watch Love on the Spectrum.
Yes.
That would be my last. And then a guilty pleasure saga of mine. It's a series of books. Starts with Odd Thomas, and they all have a different series of names following the hero Odd Thomas.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
It's a really shitty movie. Dean Koontz. It's a guilty pleasure book. I really enjoy. I picked it up just because of the name. My name's Thomas. I saw the book Thomas. I gave it a shot and became really in love with it. So
I mean, listen, my guilty pleasure books back in the day were like, oh my god, the
Twilight.
no. Oh my god, the Tom Hanks movie.
Forrest Gump.
No, not Forrest Gump.
Demon
Symbology.
Oh, Da Vinci Code. Yeah, Dan
Yes,
Brown.
Da Vinci
Yeah.
Code.
Oh, for sure. Dan Brown. Yeah, yeah.
I can't remember the name, but like symbology.
Yeah.
Everybody gets it.
Symbology.
Yeah, I would put Dean Koontz in the Dan Brown category very heavily. Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining, and this will be turned into a podcast maybe tomorrow. Hopefully, definitely by Friday. It depends on my work schedule. Sorry, but thank you guys so much for this weird, random election week podcast, webcast. Like I enjoyed this. I needed a break from the real life saga of whatever the fuck is going on in America.
The real life saga of Tara.
No, just the real life saga of whatever the fuck is going on in America. Like that's what I'm calling it right now. That's it.
Who's the hero in that story?
The saga of 2020.
I mean, really, like, let's be real. My hero is Bernie Sanders, but I mean, I had to back, you know,
Biden.
the other old guy.
Yeah.
The
Which
other
old white guy are we going to support?
yeah, the other old guy.
Oh my goodness, is that a
Hey!
Bernie Sanders doll?
I
Yeah,
love
it is.
That's amazing.
Wow.
I love you guys. Thank you so much for
All right,
having
bye,
me.
Shelby.
Yep.
This was a blast.
All right, you all have a wonderful night. Thank you for joining. I'm going to end
It's
this
nice meeting you,
broadcast.
everybody.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you.
Bye.